Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So during this webinar, I'm going to be going over some key features of Retrospect 18. It's going to include backups, backup scripts, running restores, the management console, and some other less major features. I'm going to be covering quite a bit of information today. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat or in the Q&A section, and I'll get to them at the end of each major section. There's also some tutorial videos online at retrospect.com, as well as a knowledge base with plenty of articles that cover everything I'm going to be talking about today in more detail, as well as other topics that I'm not going to be talking about today. So the first thing we're going to be looking at are the backups. So over here in the left-hand column, you can see all of these different options. First one, backup. So we'll just go ahead and get started by clicking on backup now. And when you first open this, it's going to be in this wizard mode, which works just fine. You can run through all of the options here and get your backup set up that way. But for the webinar today, I'm going to be doing everything in advanced mode. It brings a little more clarity to the process. And this is what the advanced mode window looks like. So the first thing we're going to want to do is set up our sources. And as you can see here, I've got a whole lot of different options to be used as my source. You can specify a NAS device for being to be backed up. If you want to do that, you're going to have to put in the UNC path of the device. You would click here on advanced, and it asks you to enter the UNC or HTT path for the volume or sub volume. So that's how you get your NAS devices added in if they aren't already. I've got one here, but the share is actually down right now, so I'm not going to be using that today. I've got to reconfigure that later on. But just so you know, that's how you would do it. You can also back up your clients. Here I've got my MacBook and my MacBook hard drive. And I could also, if I wanted to, drill down into the sub volumes on that hard drive and specify specific folders like I have up here under my local drives. So if you wanted to specify a sub volume, you would click on the drive, click on sub volume. It'll open the directory for that drive, and then you could either choose one of the folders that pop up, or you could drill in and click this define button to add that to your list of available sources. Today, I'm going to keep things pretty simple. I'll go ahead and just use this Gideon Anema user folder for now. And then after that, we want to go into our destination. So, obviously the source is what we're going to be backing up. The destination is where we're going to be backing up to. So same thing. It's going to ask you to create a backup set. At first, you can select from any of these different options. The bottom three here are more legacy options that people don't tend to use too much anymore, but they are there in case you want to use them. Today, we're going to be focusing on the main three that customers are using most today, and that's tape, disk, and cloud. We're going to start with a disk backup set. And you can name your backup sets whatever you want. I'm going to name this one Monday. And then it's going to go ahead and ask us to select a disk. So I'm going to go to Retrospect and Backups and define that as my drive destination. You'll see that it populates with some information here, including details about the drive. You can change how much of the disk should be used for backups if you want to. You can specify that in gigabytes or percentage. And then storage group, the storage group option here, what that means is if you use this if you're backing up a large number of disks, it allows Retrospect to track the data in separate folders and also allows Retrospect to back up different disks simultaneously to a single backup set up to a maximum number of 16 at the same time. If you want to use all 16 simultaneously, you're going to need to be running Retrospect on a system that has at least 16 gigabytes of RAM. I'm not going to use that right now, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that and then click next. And then it's going to ask you to set your backup set security. You can put a password only on the backup set for access, or we have 4 different encryption options here, with AES 256 being the most secure option. I'm going to leave it at none and click next. And then it asks you what you want to do when your backup drive becomes full. This is basically a standard grooming policy for the backup set. You can tell it to ask for a new disk, which is not grooming actually, but then you can tell it to keep only the last X number of backups, in which after it hits the threshold, it starts removing older backups. Or you can keep your backups according to Retrospect's defined policy, and it defines what that is here. And then you can tell it how many months you want it to keep according to these specifications. I'm just going to leave it on the default right now and go ahead and click next. And then it asks you to choose a location for the catalog file. The catalog file is an index that Retrospect uses kind of as a resource for everything that's in the backup. So if your backup becomes corrupt for some reason, you can tell it later, point it to this catalog file to rebuild the backup set. I'm just going to leave it on the default location, but you can really put these wherever you want. I've already got a catalog file in that location, but I don't need it, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. And then it takes us to the last window where I'm just going to click finish, and that creates my Monday backup set. So I'm going to go ahead and use that, and it's going to put Monday in the destination. And then you'll see this selecting option. This is basically filters. There's many default filters that Retrospect includes. You can go ahead down here over to configure and selectors and define your own selectors. I'll cover that in more detail later, but just remember that that is an option. Otherwise, you can, if you want to, you can use one of the pre-configured specified selectors. I'll go ahead and select all files except cache files and click OK. So now it's going to exclude the cache files from the backup. And that's pretty much it for selecting. There's different options in there. As you can see, you can do movies, music, etc. The operating system folder, operating system and applications. So there's quite a few different options included here by default. And then preview, this scans the disk and allows us to pick specific items for our backup. Usually takes a minute. It'll take longer depending on the size of your source. My source here for Gideon Anema is not very big, so it went fairly quickly. And then you can just drill down and you can select individual. You can't change your folders. I'm not sure why this is not allowing me to change my options right now. Oh, there we go. So you can deselect some and select others, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave everything selected. Oh, and there's also this little legend down here that tells you what the options are. This diamond, we'll want to pay attention to this. A diamond will show up here in this column for any files that have been backed up. And I'll show you that in a minute, but just keep that in mind as we go along. And then after you run the preview, it'll populate here telling you how many files are in that location, the total size of the files, and then the percentage. So right now we have it set at 100%. And I'll come back to this in a moment. And then we'll go ahead into options here. And you can see that we have two different main backup options. There's a normal backup and there's a recycle backup. So for the normal backup, what this does is the first time the backup runs, it will back up 100% of the selected data. Every time thereafter, it's going to run an incremental backup. So every backup after that initial full backup is going to copy only new or changed files since that full backup. If you change this to recycle backup, that erases the entire contents of the backup set and then starts over again. So on a recycle backup, it's going to erase the previous full backup and then start over with a brand new full backup. I'm just going to leave it on normal backup for now. And I'm not going to cover any of these other options in too much detail right now. But we got a block level incremental backup option here that backs up only changed data of large files, some different verification options, and then software data compression, which you may want to use if you don't have hardware compression in effect already. I'm just going to leave it where it is right now and click OK. And then let's go ahead and run the backup. Please select a new disk. Will be named to Monday. Proceed. Okay. I ran into this issue before. Let's see if I can select a different folder. There we go. And then it's going to go ahead and kick off and start running the backup. I'll let it run for about 30 seconds or so here. Let it grab a copy of a fair amount of data. And you can see it's got the different stats here as it goes along, including the megabytes it's backing up per minute. And then I'll go ahead and click stop. And it's going to ask you if you really want to stop the execution. I'm going to go ahead and click yes. And this is for illustrative purposes here. So if I go to history now, I can see the backup that I just ran, the process where it was at, and then I can go ahead and click log. And it'll tell you here's a log of everything the backup was doing. And then you can see down here that the execution was stopped by the operator. And it tells you the remaining files, the completed files, the performance, and the duration of how long the backup ran. If we were backing up the C drive, then after the files get copied, Retrospect would begin copying the system registry, the system state, and everything needed for disaster recovery. So I'm going to go ahead and click done and go back into backup. Now, as you can see, Retrospect remembers the settings from the backup that I just ran. It's always going to be the most recent previous backup. So when you click that, it's going to open the last backup that was run. Let's go ahead and click preview again. It's going to go ahead and do another scan. Okay. And as you can see, I've got a diamond here that shows that that file has been backed up. Let's see. I could go into the log and see what specifically it grabbed, because it did grab quite a bit of data. I'd probably have to drill down in here for a bit to find everything that was backed up. But anyway, We don't need to see it, but this file has the diamond down here, files and folders that already exist and do not need to be copied again. So this one was already backed up. There are more that were backed up in one of these, in some of these directories somewhere, but I'm not going to spend time drilling down right now to find out what those were. And then here you can see that these numbers have changed. It has 11, it backed up 11% of the directory, and it still needs to copy this much data. So if I started the backup again, it would pick up where it left off and start copying that remaining data. If I go back into options and change this to recycle backup, it's going to change this back to, this should reflect 100%, but it's going to basically start the whole backup over and copy the whole thing again. And usually that shows 100%. There might be a bug here, but I'm not sure what's going on there. But if I change it back to, whoop, not preview, options, and then normal backup, it's going to show us again what we need to copy, because now it's going to run an incremental backup, whereas on the recycle backup option, it's going to start over and copy 100% of the data over again. So now let's go ahead and look at multiple backup sets and schedules. So I'm going to come back into destination and create new. I'm going to use disk again right now, and I'm going to name this one Tuesday. And for some reason, it was having trouble with that subfolder before. It might be full, according to what I specified. So I'm just going to use what worked. And then it's going to be the exact same options as before. So backup set security, grooming or not, catalog file. And then I'm going to replace the one that exists and then click finish. It's going to create my new Tuesday backup set. So I chose the same backup drive for this new backup set. So if you're doing an offsite rotation, you might want to swap out the drives between scheduled backups. So we'll go ahead and look at some scheduling. It's going to go ahead and scan for that new backup set. And now it changed it over to Tuesday. And yeah, for some reason, this is just stuck at 11%. That might, we had a recent update on Retrospect 18. So I'm going to make sure that I talk to one of my coworkers about that. But obviously, I've changed it to a brand new backup set. There's no backup data in this backup set yet. So this should reflect 100% of the data. So let's go ahead and go into schedule and look at that. It's going to ask us to create a new script. I'm going to call this nightly backup. And now we've changed to the script window. Looks very similar to the backup now window, but it is a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and select our source. This time I'm just going to select the C drive. And it's going, as you can see, because we're running a script, I've got now multiple sources that are going to be backed up. This is redundant though, so I don't, now that I've got the whole C drive, I don't need this anymore. But I could come in, and if I wanted to back up this subdirectory on D, I could go ahead and do that. And now I've got the C drive as well as the test backup folder on the D drive. And these are both going to be included in this backup script. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. Where'd Monday go? Oh, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and select Monday and add that to the list. And now, because we're in a script and not just an immediate backup, we can also define multiple backup sets as our target destinations. Remember that Monday and Tuesday are both set to be backed up to the exact same location. But again, like I mentioned earlier, you might want to do a rotation. So let's assume this was an external hard drive that you had plugged in for Monday night's backup. And then on Tuesday, you wanted to plug in a different drive, but back up the same data. So you have multiple copies. Then you could do that as well. And then you would go in here and set up your schedule. We're going to go ahead and click add. It's going to ask you what kind of schedule you want to add. You've got day of the week, setting it on a repeating interval or just a single date. For this purpose, I'm going to leave it on day of the week. And for our Monday night script, we're going to go ahead and select Monday. We'll leave it to kick off at 10 p.m. Because I have selected Monday here, this is going to change automatically. And then weeks, I'll cover that in a minute. And then you can tell it here what you want to do on this particular schedule. You can leave it on a normal backup. You can change it to a recycle backup, an entirely new backup set, or a new member. Say if you had if this was a tape backup set and you wanted to do it to a brand new tape, you could set it to that as well. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK for that. And now I've got my Monday schedule. I'll go ahead and add another one. This one's going to be for Tuesday. Leave it on the default. And so here you can see that for Monday's backup set, it's going to kick off every Monday starting on this date at 10 p.m. Tuesday's backup, the backup to Tuesday, is going to kick off every Tuesday starting on this date at 10 p.m. And now you can see that we've got a list down here of our scheduled executions. But let's go ahead and make this a little more advanced. I'm going to go ahead and add some new backup sets. Let's do cloud for this one. I'm going to call this one Wednesday. Give me a second here so I can grab my S3 credentials. Those of you who are not familiar with S3 Cloud, it's going to ask you for the path to the bucket, and that's what this is. The access key, it works functionally similar to a username for logging into that bucket, and then the secret key is going to be your password. And after I get through the script section here, we'll take a look and see if you guys have any questions. Okay. And then you can, again, tell it how much of that bucket location you want to use. Again, you can tell it to create a storage group. I'm going to turn that off. And you see a new option down here called the immutable retention policy. And this is great for protecting against ransomware. What this does is it locks down all of the data getting backed up into your cloud bucket. And you can specify the number of days you want it to be locked down for. That keeps anyone from logging in and changing or deleting any data in that backup set for the specified period of time. It's important to remember not all cloud providers currently support this. So if you do want to use immutable retention on your backups to protect against ransomware, you'll want to check with the cloud provider you're using to see if they do in fact support that. I know that Amazon does. I'm not going to turn this on right now, but yeah, just and also for cloud providers, there is a portion on the Retrospect website that gives detail on all of the cloud providers that Retrospect officially supports. We've got a few of the main ones populated automatically here. If it's a lesser known cloud provider, you can select S3 compatible provider. And again, you'll want to double check on the Retrospect website to make sure that your cloud provider is in fact compatible. Here you can see a local storage option. And what this is sometimes you can request that your cloud storage provider send you a hard drive, and you can back up to that hard drive, and then you will ship that back to the cloud provider, and they will then upload it to the cloud for you. So that is an option here as well. I'm going to go ahead and click next. It's going to be the same thing as before, backup set security, catalog file, and then finish. And now you can see I've got a cloud Wednesday backup set, and it has a cloud icon as opposed to a disk icon over here. Let's go ahead and create a few more backup sets. This time I'm going to select tape and name this one Thursday. You can allow hardware data compression, specify it as a warm backup set, or go directly to defining additional tape backup sets. I'm just going to leave it on the default. Click next, same things. And then this is a new window for tape backup sets. You can tell it automatically to proceed to add one or more tape members after finish is clicked. Now it pops up with your device window for your environment. I don't actually have a tape library, so nothing is here. But normally, when you do have a tape library on your network, that will show up here, and it'll give you some detailed information about it. And now I've got my Thursday tape backup set in here as well. But I'm going to go ahead and create 2 additional backup sets. I'll call this one Friday. Storage group. Next. I'm going to go ahead and create one more. Day 2. And then so now I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and 2 options for Friday. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Click OK again. Now what happened there? Select these. There we go. Make sure they're selected before you click OK. And then it'll add all of these backup sets to the destination for this particular script. So the reason I created so many backup sets here is so we could look at scheduling in a little more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my schedule here. I'm going to add some new schedules, day of week, create Wednesday for Wednesday. These are all going to be the same as what I did for Monday and Tuesday. Well, just the Wednesday and Thursday ones. Oops, modify, change that to Thursday. And then, so for Friday 1 and Friday 2, this is to look at the options a little bit differently. So for Friday 1, I'm going to actually change this weeks from 1 to 2. And what that does is it changes the schedule from every Friday to every other Friday. So at here you can see it changed to do normal backup to Friday every other week on Friday starting on this date. And then you can come in here and specify the date. I don't need to do this on this one, but I will need to do it on the next one. So I'm going to run a normal backup to the Friday backup set. Oops. Schedule. Where did my something went wonky there. Let's go ahead and add those in again. Start with Friday this time, since that's where we were every 2 weeks. Friday. I don't need to change this for this particular backup set because it's going to automatically default to the most recent upcoming Friday, which is 2/25 at 10. And then I'm going to go to add again. I'm going to select Friday again, change this to 2 weeks, but this time I'm going to select Friday 2, and we don't want it starting on the same date as the regular Friday backup set. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. So 2/25, that's when Friday is going to kick off. We want, since it's alternating every other week, we're going to change this to the following Friday and click OK. So Friday's kicking off every other week on Friday, starting on 2/25. Friday 2 is going to be every other week, starting on Friday, starting on 2/4. And there's one more thing I want to do. I can change this to recycle. So Friday is going to do a normal backup. Friday 2 is going to be a recycle backup every time it runs. Let me add Wednesday and Thursday back in, since those didn't take. I must have accidentally clicked cancel on my scheduling instead of OK, which is why they didn't populate. Okay, so now they took. So now we've got multiple additional options here on our scheduled executions. So I'm set to back up my C drive, my test backup folder on D, to each of these backup sets on the schedule that I just created. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And it's kicking that off. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. But what I wanted to show in the activity monitor was, if we go to scheduled now, we can see that we've got our nightly backup script set on a schedule. And you can see Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 10 p.m., Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then Friday is alternating between Friday, starting this Friday, and Friday 2, starting next Friday, with Friday being a normal backup and Friday 2 being a recycle backup. So there's a lot of flexibility here in Retrospect on how we set our scheduling. And then once you've got, you can set up multiple scripts for different things with different schedules. And then you can come over here into reports and activity monitor. It'll open up this window, which opened up for me automatically. And then you can go through and see the schedule for everything that you have set up. And that's it for backups and backup sets for today. And in the next section, I'm going to move on to covering the Retrospect client. But before I do that, I'm going to give it a moment so you guys can ask your questions, and going to take a short break here. So we'll resume again in about a minute or so. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in yet. So we'll just roll along here. Okay, so the Retrospect client. What we're looking at now is the main Retrospect host software that's running on the backup server. If I come over here into clients, I can see I've got my MacBook. To do this, we need to install another portion of Retrospect called the Retrospect client on each of the clients that we want to connect to Retrospect. So the client is basically a control panel that can be installed on Macintosh, Windows, or Linux. And it allows Retrospect to see the computer over the network using TCP, which requires port 97 for the TCP UDP protocol. And Retrospect will try to open those ports automatically when the client gets installed. So let's go ahead and take a look at that on my Mac here. And this is going to be very similar across Mac, Windows, and Linux. And so this is what the Retrospect client looks like. I don't have this connected right now because of how I've got my VPN set up. But for your networks, this would not have this little icon here, and it would be set to on, and it would show the backups that you're running on your schedule. If we go into the history tab here, this lists all of your previous backups. I'm not going to have any today, but the backups that you ran for this client in Retrospect would populate here. And then over here, you would see a restore button that will enable the user, in my case, me on my Macintosh, to initiate my own restore. So my Mac here gets backed up to the Windows server location. And then I can come in here and run my own restores at will. And that's also an option that you can turn off for users. And I'll show you guys how to do that too, so that they are unable to do that. But it is turned on by default. If we go to notifications, there are different options here for notifying the user on backups. You can notify them after a backup. You can notify them if there's no backup in X number of days. And then you can report smart errors as well. And you can show Retrospect status in the menu bar. That one's always there, by the way. Privacy. So here, the end user can exclude data from the backup. You can also turn this option off at the server level as the backup administrator, and limit what the end user can do in Retrospect. But if this is turned on, then the user can come in here. They would click on this add button. Let me go ahead and get this going here. Unlock it, and then they could click add, and then they could define which directories or files they want to exclude from the backup. So if I wanted to exclude my movies, I could go ahead, select that and click add. And now this location for movies is going to be excluded from the backup. And you can specify here how that works as well. Schedule, that's just going to be a basic scheduling option for delaying proactive backups. I'll mention the proactive AI backups. Proactive AI, what that is it's a feature that scans your network for available machines, for available clients, and then it starts backing up those clients on a specified schedule. And so let's say you've got an employee who has a laptop that they take out of the office for 2 weeks. Say they go on vacation and they're connected remotely, not on your network. Once they come back into the office and plug back into the network, if you've got a proactive AI script set up, it will automatically detect that that laptop has shown up back on the network, and it will begin backing it up again. Proactive AI backs up starting with the oldest machine on the network that hasn't been backed up in the longest amount of time. Here, the user can come in and tell it to delay that until after such and such date. So if they know they're going on vacation, they're going to be taking their laptop, they can come in here and tell it to delay those proactive backups until after a certain date. I'm not going to cover the advanced right now, but you do want to, when you install Retrospect Client, you need to set a password that the Retrospect host server software then uses to connect to the client. You need to have that. If you forget it for some reason, you can come in here on the client side and you can tell it to reset that password so that you can then add it back into Retrospect. So that's an important point on the advanced tab here. So let's go back over to our server and we see the client database. We were just looking at Retrospect Client on my MacBook. And I'm going to talk about a few different ways that we can manually add clients in Retrospect now. So you click add. Here you can see that there's an interface option. We'll just leave it at the default for now. I'm not going to cover anything else for the time being, but there are three different access methods here. Multicast. Multicast scans the network, finds any clients on that network, and then they'll show up in the list here. Subnet, you can change this to subnet, come over here to subnets, click add, and then you can define your subnets on your network. If you've got multiple subnets that separate groups of machines, say you've got the accounting group on its own subnet and the IT group on a different subnet, and you wanted to add those both separately, you can come in here, define those subnets. It would add them to this list. You would click OK, and then it would then scan those subnets for the backup clients rather than the entire multicast network. Or there's this direct feature where you can put in a DNS or WINS name or punch in the IP address of the client. Then you would click test. It would test connectivity to that client, and it would either come back with a connection successful or an error message saying it couldn't connect for some reason. But if it connects successfully, you would click OK and then done, and it would add that new client into your list of the backup clients database here. So again, Retrospect will ask for that client password when installing the client here. It'll ask you to put in that password. So if I go in here and I punch in an IP address and add the client, it'll then ask me for the client password. There is an alternative method for deploying clients across the network, for example, using MSI, in which case in Retrospect, we create a public and private key file that you configure in Retrospect, and then you drop that key file into the client installer folder. And you can point your group policy and distribution tools to that file and push the client software out to computers over the network, and they will get automatically added to Retrospect. So if you're adding a large number of clients into Retrospect and you want to use the public private key file without having to punch in that password each time, that option is available. And it makes the process a lot easier. Say if you've got like 200 clients you want to add in, that might be a better method to take rather than going through and adding the client passwords in one by one. So when you're installing the client here, it won't ask you for the client password if you're using that public private key method. And there's also another method for sending a download link to the users so that they can install the client themselves. So there's really multiple options for that. By default, though, clients are added using DHCP. If an IP address changes for some reason, Retrospect should be able to find that machine. There's an article on the Retrospect website detailing a remote backup also, which allows you to add clients that are not on your local network or VPN. So if you are a backup, if you offer a backup service to companies and you've got multiple companies on their own networks, there is a way to add those remotely into Retrospect without them being on the network. For adding remote clients, you'll need to make sure your firewall security allows traffic over ports 497 for backup broadcasting and port 22024 for on-demand requests. Both ports utilize TCP UDP. And again, if you don't expect you to remember that information right now, but there is a KB article on retrospect.com for adding remote clients, which gives all of the detail in that process, as well as those ports and all of the information you need. And so I briefly mentioned the client properties window. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and select my MacBook, click on properties, and this pops up with some options. So here, as the backup administrator, I can control what this client can do. So I can prevent the user from turning off the client software. I can prevent the user from stopping any backups that are running. I can prevent them from excluding items from backups, and so on and so forth. If these are checked, all of those options are turned on for that client. You can see there's an encrypt network link here if you want a more secure connection. Some other options. This will tell you how Retrospect is accessing that client. This isn't going to work right now because the way my VPN's set up, it's not actually going to connect. So I'm just going to stop that. But you can see that there's some options here as well. You can tell it to reset the password, etc., sync clock, so on and so forth. Oh, and here you can also update the client version. So if I select this client, click update, it's going to push an update to the Retrospect client to my MacBook. And then you can click the volume tabs also to see what volumes are available, which right now we only see the Macintosh HD. What else? So once a client has been added into Retrospect, you can then add it as a backup source. So let's go back into our script that we created previously. Go ahead and click edit. So I can come into source, click add. I can select either my MacBook overall, or if I've got sub volumes defined, I can select those two and then click OK. And then it will add that into my script to be backed up as well. Retrospect can see all of the disks on this machine. If you don't want to back up the entire thing, again, just like any other source, you can drill down in, there will be a sub volumes option. And then you can add the sub volume there as well. I don't have a connection here right now, so it's not going to work. And that's it for the Retrospect client today. I'll go ahead and look at restores in a moment here. But if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. But we've only got about 10 minutes left here, so I'm going to move right along. Let's go ahead and open the restore window. Again, you get a wizard, but I'm going to switch to advanced mode. And then restore files and folders, or restore an entire volume. Entire volume is used for disaster recovery, but for this purpose, I'm just going to leave it on the default files and folders. And now when you select source, it's going to ask you for the backup set. So I can see that I've got a snapshot here on the Monday backup set. I'm going to go ahead and select that as my source. It's going to match the files. I'm going to select my destination as my desktop. That's going to be this desktop over here. And then files chosen. So now I can actually see what files were backed up in that backup. And I can come in here in the restore window and I can select the files that I want to be restored. So I've got 3 files at this size, and it's leaving this amount free on the destination. I'm not going to cover options here right now, but there are some additional options. You know, right here it says don't restore Windows state, don't restore Windows security information. Feel free to check that out and dig in there. I'm not going to do that for the sake of time right now. Let's go ahead and click restore. As you can see over here, a folder popped up on the desktop called Monday. And we've got the directory structure as well as the files that I selected to be restored. For some reason, it didn't grab that third file, but that was probably a user error somewhere on my part. And that's basically how restores work. Not a lot to it. You can set up restores on a schedule, but most customers never use that option. They kind of run restores as they need them and not on regular repeating intervals. But you can set up a schedule for your restores as well. There's a disaster recovery option you see here. What this does is it creates bootable media for Windows. It's a Microsoft Windows PE environment that includes a copy of Retrospect. You only need to create the recovery disk once. You don't need one for every computer. And there's a tutorial on the website that shows what it looks like when you're booted from that recovery disk. You can either do a local restore or a restore across the network for machines that were backed up using the Retrospect client. The restore is basically performed by going to restore, and then this time you would select restore an entire volume for disaster recovery. So here, I would need to first download the Windows image and create a recovery disk before I can use this feature. I would then take that disk and boot my machine that was backed up off of that recovery disk. The whole process of making the media is easy, takes about 10 to 15 minutes. You will, however, need to download some files from Microsoft for that Windows PE disk. Let's see what, I guess we'll just take a peek at the management console really quickly because that's important for people who want to use it. So Retrospect Management Console. This will be console.retrospect.com. You can access the web console from any browser or device. It allows you to view what Retrospect is doing mostly in real time, but it could be delayed in its connection to Retrospect by about 2 to 3 minutes. You'd need to sign up first. I already have an account, so I'm just going to go ahead and log in. I told it to remember me. And then this is what the management console looks like. Here, I've got my servers added. So to do that, you go to Settings, Organizations, and then you would create a new organization. It'll give you a UUID, and then you will go into Retrospect. Oh, I'm already on it. Duh. And then you would go into Preferences, Management, and you would enable the management console, and you would put that UUID in right here. And that would connect this instance of Retrospect to the console. So if I go back to my dashboard, you can see I've got SER721 here. That is the server I'm running on. It shows up here because I have it connected using that UUID. So let's look at a couple of the different options here real quick. Activities. You'll see information here when a backup is running. You can also pause the backup here. Retrospect will take a couple minutes to catch up to what you do here over the internet, but there will be a pause button right here about if a backup is running. Let's see. You can see there's different information. You got your backup report. If you got a proactive AI script, your backups that you've ran, including your most recent backups. It'll tell you what hasn't been backed up in 7 days. And then you can see detailed storage information here, and as well as predictions of what's going to be utilized in those locations. And that's your storage. Your storage map here estimates the amount of data that's being stored. So you can hover over and see each of the estimated storage for each one. Let's go up here to backup report. This is just what it sounds like. It gives you a report of your backups, shows you amount of the data that's been changed, and can help with identification of a ransomware attack. I don't have anything here right now, so I'll just move on. Geo tracking shows you your server information on a map. So you can see here, I've got my R720 in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and my MacBook, which is in Castle Rock, Colorado. And you can see on the map where things reside. So I've got me down here, or my server down here in Colorado Springs, and me up here in Castle Rock. You got your sources, got your list of available sources here, backup sets that you've created. You can see we've got our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays that I just created, as well as the last backup that was ran for each of those. And then scripts. You can use the web browser here to create new scripts to run in Retrospect, and you can also modify your existing scripts right here in the management console. So for settings, I already covered the UUID, but let's see what else I want to talk about in the last couple minutes we have remaining. We got our backup servers, got my user. Oh, right. Let's go back to dashboard. I'll go ahead and click on this. Actually, that's not where I want to be. Organizations. Here is where I want to click on the server. Okay. So you can see that there's a deployment feature here for downloading the backup engine installer. There's also going to be a deployment feature here for Retrospect client for any clients you want to manage. Creating a public private key will enable that option here, which I don't have currently, and it will take you to the download page where you can then push out the client. And again, we do have documentation on the website that explains all of this in detail, as well as how to set it up. And that's a brief overview of the management console. Again, you can access this from any web browser, and you can manage your different Retrospect servers. I can manage the one that's running. This is not the Retrospect client running on my MacBook. This is the Retrospect host software that I'm running on my MacBook. So if you got multiple backup servers and you add those UUIDs, you'll see a full list of that here. But we got about 1 minute left. I'm not going to cover anything else today, but I will give you guys a couple of links as well as email addresses. If you have any questions that you think of later, you can email either your sales rep or sales@retrospect.com or support@retrospect.com.